What is the fastest way to lose a prospect's attention?
That is a great question and a great one to start with. I'd almost turn that on its head, Daniel, and say before you start losing attention, you've got to get them to pay attention in the first place. I mean, it's like you've got to see conversations almost like an economic equation where you want to get them to pay attention right at the beginning and then get them to keep paying that attention. And I think the fastest way to not get people to pay attention is to not connect to them right at the beginning. And so, you have to really understand who it is you're talking to. What are their dreams? Connect to their dreams, connect to their pain. Be willing to show that you've heard the story of their dreams and their pains and what that's going to mean for them in the future. I mean, I think that is fundamental. And essentially, although I call myself a story spotter, I mean, really, that starts with spotting other people's stories. And if you were going into a blind meeting, which we rarely are these days, because I mean, we've got one finger in Google can find out most things about most people. So you've always got something that you can connect to, even if it's not on a personal, on an organizational level, that you can connect to. But if it's really thin, then just zip this thing up. Ask some good questions. What and how questions in particular are very deep questions to get people's story brains motoring along. But that's the thing I'd say is win their attention, get them paying attention right at the beginning by connecting to their dreams, connecting to their fears, and then just keep playing that back right throughout the conversation. Show that sits at the heart. Your desire to help them with their dreams, to reach their dreams or avoid their fears sits at the heart of this conversation.
It sounds to me that there is a lot of emotional intelligence required there, being able to understand what's important to them, listening to them, asking really good questions.
Yeah.
So is this more of a emotional intelligence approach to a conversation?
I think it's 100% that. And I think that, we make the mistake when, not that I have a suit and tie on today, but as soon as we put a suit and tie on, what we do naturally, I mean, we wouldn't have friends, we wouldn't have partners unless we were able to actually do that emotionally intelligent connection. Why should it be any different in business with our prospects, as you say? I mean, we are human beings, we are animals who make as people always say, we are emotional animals making rational decisions. I mean, I can't remember, it was the president of Ford in India said that buying a car is 1,000 logical reasons looking for an emotional reason. And I think that to actually to connect to that thing emotionally, to show your warmth before you show your credibility is an incredibly powerful thing to do and a necessary thing to do if you want to build those connections. It's really at the heart of it. I completely agree with you. Emotional intelligence is fundamental to this thing.
One of my cousins, he said, you don't have to be interesting. He said, you've just got to be interested. And for me, when I learned that at a young age, it was a big concept to try to process, because when you're in your teens, you're like a peacock. You're flashing your things, you're trying to get attention. But then you realize it's more about being interesting. And it's a concept, but to break it down into those what and how questions starts to become a lot more strategic.
Well,
what's of interest to you?
I think that's absolutely right, and one of the joys of getting older is you sort of feel that you don't necessarily have to do that peacocking about, and I sort of wake up every day and I mean, this will sound horribly cheesy, but I sort of think to myself that if I don't learn something that day, then what is the point of going on? So I mean, actually go into that very quickly. I mean, I work a lot with organizations who are pitching for big tenders, big sort of global tenders, and during that scoping process, a lot of that is about learning what the fears and what the dreams are of these organizations and how you can help them. And I remember many years ago working with an organization who were the FD, the financial director of this organization. He was a big ballet and opera fan, and they'd organized a dinner with the executive of this organization and then the people who were pitching to them. And You have never seen a bunch of blokes, and it was a bunch of blokes, trying to avoid the having to be sat next to the FD because they were saying, "Well, I don't know anything about ballet and opera. I mean, Formula One and football. Yeah, I'm cool with that." But and I kept saying, and that is the gift. The gift is you can sit down next to this guy and say, "Listen, do you know what? I don't get it. I don't get ballet. Please enlighten me. Make me want to go and see Don Giovanni." I mean, I think that idea of being interested, as you say, wow, what an opportunity that is every day of our lives.
One thing that I noticed that had been trending probably since 2016 or so was live streaming. And a friend of mine said, "Daniel, you should try this Facebook live streaming." And I said, "I can see so many people on there and it turns me off." And then I isolated it to one thing that really turned me off was that when people would start their live stream, they'd say, "Hey guys, I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes until Facebook warms up the algorithm and I get a bit of an audience." And for the first couple of times, I'd sit there and think, are they going to start? And then 30 seconds goes by and a minute, I'm still exhausting all of my patience thinking, are we going to start? And then 2 minutes later, I'm gone. And then every time I saw a Facebook Live where somebody said, "I'm just going to let Facebook warm up," I just turned it off immediately. And online, if you want to lose my attention, drag me out for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. It's so, I mean, we don't have somebody said to me the other day, it's not that we have a short attention span. We have a short interest span nowadays. I mean, how do you grab people's interest very early on? And it comes back to that thing we were talking about earlier about sort of connecting to other people. Because I think, our brains, you're saying it, but live streaming is out there. We are overloaded with information. There is a bunch of noise out there. I mean, my mission in life is to help people save their really important and great messages from drowning in that sea of noise. And unless you connect early on and really just hit the ground running, bang, people are gone. They've done something else. There are a lot of things battling for attention out there. So, it's how do you make yourself the thing that they want to spend time with?
In our society, we're heavily focused on the words, heavily focused on what we're going to say. And one of the first things that I realised about you today when we opened up on Riverside was your tone of voice. And as soon as you spoke, I felt that warmth, I felt that resonance, and immediately I felt connected to you. So how can we build interest? How can we build desire in a conversation? And I'd really like you to talk about that tone of voice, because being an Aussie, we have this high-pitched voice. And sometimes I hear that and I go,
I know what you mean.
"Get me out."
Okay, confession time. I'm an Aussie too. I grew up in Adelaide, but I actually went to NIDA, which is the big drama school in Sydney. So, so for 3 years, you're having nip and tuck on your vocal cords, essentially. And so whatever happened, this happened. But I mean, it was, that's sort of one of the silver spoons that I was given in my life. So it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I think it's, what's his name? Chris Voss. Do you know Chris Voss? He's FBI negotiating guru, essentially. He talks about this a lot, doesn't he? The sort of like the tone of voice and the warmth and the mellowness of letting people know that you're warm, that you're there with them. So that is one thing that draws people in. There is a danger with it because, I mean, I think he talks about the late night TV, or not late night TV, late night DJ voice. And the danger with that is late night DJ voices put you to sleep. So you got to find the emphasis in there. Sorry, mate.
Very hypnotic.
Very hypnotic. That's the thing. I mean, that's the thing is it's our brain waves go into a sort of a pattern, don't they? And they go, oh. There's a friend of mine whose son does exactly that ASMR thing that's all over YouTube at the moment. There's a mate of mine whose son is in Sydney, makes a fortune from this stuff. And it's basically based on that. It's whispering and sort of like, you listen to it, you go, boom, gone. 8 hours, no worries. But it's, I think actually finding the pause, finding the emphasis in what it is you want to say, that is a purely technical way of actually sort of keeping people's interest. Actually just using your words for what they are, not just see, this bit here needs to be in neon. give it a bit of lean into it. Give some emphasis there. Pause. Go into the next thing. That's a great technical way of keeping interest. And then again, there is that thing of coming back to what are their dreams, what are their fears. So showing that all of this is orientated towards them. But a big thing for me in terms of keeping interest is I talk about people with their stories. They need to kick their stories in the butt. And what I mean by that is they need to use the word but. Because a lot of people, when they're telling their stories, especially in business, they want to show how great they are. And they go, we did this, and then we did this, and then we did this, and everything is great, and we can do it for you, which is, it's a story, it's a sequence of events. It's just not a very good story. Because what connects us, what connects people, what gets people hooked in and continually hooked in is the problems that are being overcome, which is the essence of story, essentially. How do you actually sort of use that word but? We were doing this, but then this happened. So what we had to do then was do this and this and this, but then this happened. So that continual kicking your story in the butt is I think one of the most powerful and most underused tools, if you like, in storytelling, because I think in the back of our minds we're always wanting to appear credible, and that stops us sometimes being vulnerable, which the but and the problems does. But what it does is it does hook people in emotionally.
I want to go down that path, but before we do, I want to go back to something that you said before, and it was the power of the pause. Why is it that people are so afraid to pause? They have that stream of consciousness and they want to let it out. And and there's something I know about breathing is you can only talk when you're exhaling. You can't talk while you're inhaling. And where they should pause, they just roll straight through. So what's happening that prevents people from pausing?
I think it's fear. There's a lot of people sort of treat a lot of communication in business. There's a little voice on their shoulder, really, talking to them saying, oh, you're going to bore people, or they know more than you do, or oh, what if they ask you that question? And so it's almost like they're at the 3:30 at Randwick trying to sort of like get their heads down and get over that finish line as fast as they possibly can. And that's how they treat it. They think, I've just got to get this information out really, really quickly. And then hope they haven't got any questions, or if they have got any questions, hope that I actually cover them. And I think that's the wrong way. Well, it stops it being a dialogue. So I think fear sits a lot at the heart of a lot of lack of pausing. What we don't realize is that if you're telling a great story, which is obviously, where my, business storytelling is what my bread and butter is that people need time to actually sort of wander through that metaphorically and observe it. So to give them the time to be able to give them the pauses, to be able to see that story means that if you're creating a good enough story, then they start colouring in the details as well, and you start to co-create that story, and there's nothing better than that, to join two minds together. So that's a slightly long answer to your question, was what stops people, but I think fear sits right at the heart of it, and just realising, pause because it gives them an opportunity to sort of connect with you. It also gives you a great opportunity to focus out and think, are they getting this? Am I boring them? Do I need to move on? Do I need to ask a question here? Do I need to be interested, as you said? So, I mean, I think realize what the fear is. Realize that fear is really a voice trying to stop you from dying. He's trying to tell your old brain and say, you might die here. Guess what, guys? You're not going to die. Nobody died in a business meeting. Certainly not from murder, as far as I know. Don't quote me on that. I'm sure somebody will be Googling now and sort of saying, well, actually, but it's, but you are not going to be attacked during a business meeting. So just shove that fear out the window. Say, thank you. I know you're trying to save me. You're just not helpful now. I'm going to take a bit of time here.
I noticed that in your conversation, you're bringing it to life with a lot of emotion. With the emotion, you're also bringing in the physiology your tempo and your pace is like a moving target. You speed it up, you slow it down, you raise the tone, you drop it down. And I'm feeling that in this conversation, that's building a lot of interest. Also with your metaphors, like the Randwick 330, it's creating these rich pictures in the mind. And I want to be in this conversation.
Oh,
I
that's
want to
lovely.
be here, and there's been no facts shared. There's been no data. There's been no research, and you haven't bored me to death with the facts.
Oh, I can do it if you want.
Thank you.
No,
Where's the
thank you.
stop
That's a
button?
lovely compliment. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. Bye. But that's the interesting thing, isn't it? I'm actually about to start writing a book about my work, and my main aim is to make that book really short, because people want practical stuff. They want to be engaged. They want the metaphors. They want all of that stuff, and that's even harder in the writing in some ways. And I think people are. I think a lot of business books are basically a blog or a side of A4 that got out of control, and it's people sort of pack it with that data and the facts and everything. It's not that the data and the facts aren't important. I think they are staggeringly important. They are they are the vocabulary of business, if you want, but what they aren't is the language of business. Those have to be, you have to put the facts in a context, which is story, and then, to your other point, tell it with a bit of feeling, you use the word emotion, and that comes through the way you say stuff as much as anything.
I was interviewing a gentleman yesterday, and he was talking about finance. And after the podcast, I said, "You've just made finance sound sexy." And he was so emotional. He was so passionate about what he did. He was so into that transformation that he was providing his customers. And I said to him, I said, "This is fantastic because my mother-in-law, she's an accountant. And when she talks about numbers, I want to go to sleep. I love her, but I want to go to sleep during the conversation."
Yeah.
And it is that emotion. And there's that blend of facts. And when I was in selling many years ago, they said, facts tell, but stories sell.
That's
And my
absolutely
mentor
true.
had said, "Daniel, you need to get your first few customers, and then you need to understand their story. When you met them, what was their goal? What were the challenges they had to face? And by
Yeah.
working with you, what were they able to resolve and achieve?" And so he taught me some 2 and 3 minute stories. And what it did was it gave me the confidence to go in. I was still green, I was still wet behind the ears. I could walk into a home. Yes, I didn't know all the facts, I didn't know all the logistics, but I could tell a good story.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, somebody's signing a piece of paperwork. I'm going, "Story selling? This is incredible." I'm just going to keep
So
telling
true.
stories.
Yeah.
And as my career evolved and I had more stories, I could handle objections with stories. And at the end of the story, I'd notice the homeowner look across and nod and say, "You know what? I really get that. For the first time, I get it." And I realized it was simple, but they felt smart. And when they got it, they would sign.
That's exactly it, Daniel. That's exactly it. It's an interesting one. I sort of see like a story in that context of selling in particular as like the little gift that you leave on the table for people, because they can sometimes people aren't going to go and say, "Oh, listen, you know, I've just had this meeting with Daniel, and you won't believe the number he told me about the ROI on this." I mean, what they'll do is they'll talk about the story, and that sort of does your marketing for you. And it's interesting. There's a guy who I'm a big fan of, based in the States, called David Hutchins, who wrote a book called Story Dash. I really love his work, and he says something in that which is numbers, facts will build understanding, but stories build belief. And you've only got to look at basically every religion in the world. They are based on stories. I mean, that is the stories you tell will help to build the belief. And there is emotion behind that as well, because what you're saying to me there is people get you. They get how you connect to it. And the guy you interviewed yesterday, you made finance sexy. I mean, there's that old saying, isn't there? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And the way you tell your story shows how much you care, and through it, you show how much you know.
I think this topic of story selling is so important. And I think we need it at all levels of the business, from the person who picks up the phone to the person who signs the check
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
For leaders, what are the three unspoken questions that every leader must answer immediately when they move into a role?
Yeah, funnily enough, I've just been working with a fantastic leader on exactly this, on her first 100 days in a new role on CEO, and it was and she was coming in on day 2, and we were working on her sort of all hands presentation, 20 minutes to the organization, basically day 2, morning of day 2, and I don't think I've met a single leader who doesn't want to go and sort of say, right, this is the strategy, this is what I'm seeing at the moment, this is where we're going to go. And it becomes very sort of transaction oriented. But I think that there are two questions, and that is an important question. That is an important question. But sitting behind that very logical, this is where we are at the moment, these are the problems ahead, this is where we're going to go, there are two gatekeepers which are sitting behind that. And I think those two gatekeepers are, one, asking two questions. One of them is, do I like you? And the second question is, do you like me? And then the third question is that one, okay, so where can we go together? You don't go with somebody, you don't go on holiday with somebody unless you think, oh yeah, I like this person, and you know what, I think they like me. Off you go. It's no different in business. So how you address the do I like you, do you like me is very important. And I think it comes down to very intentional and strategic story. I'll give you this example to the first question. This leader, she basically showed 3 photographs, and the first photograph was of her and her family, her 4 kids, standing outside a palace in Salzburg, which was one of the sets for the Sound of Music, and all the family smiling in there. And she said, I want to show you this photograph because what I want you to know is I'm going to be your greatest cheerleader as your leader. This is me outside this palace in the Sound of Music. And these 4 people, my husband and my kids, have just come off a Sound of Music bicycle ride. 2 hours before, they had no desire to do this thing whatsoever. But they knew I loved the musical, and I really, really sort of sold it to them. And do you know what? They had a great time. So, quick story about her sort of, and she said, this is what I want to do for you. I will be your cheerleader. I will be there in the background saying, come on, guys, let's do this. That's sort of saying who you are. It's strategic, it's intentional, but brought to life through something personal, something a little bit vulnerable, something that you can share about yourself. So that was just a great example of this is who I am and what this will mean for you. And then to the second question is very much around, do you like me? I think the first thing leaders need to do, even before day 1, is get out there or speak to HR at least. Where are the values in action at the moment? Where are the good things happening? So you can actually play that back and say, do you know, listen, I was in the Louisiana office last week, and I was talking to Mary, and she said that whatever it was, and just demonstrate that you have connected to the good things that are going on. Then head into, okay, you like me, I like you, let's see where we're going to go. Let's go on this journey together. I think those are the 3 questions. Not necessarily spoken, implicit, but they need answering.
That picture, I can see myself in the Sound of Music. I'm inside the picture right now.
It was a great photo. She's a great leader as well, I have to say.
I remember Oprah Winfrey was interviewed many years ago, and the interview was about interviewing others. And on a very similar level here, she said at the end of every single conversation that she had, for every person that she spoke to, whether they led a country or led a company, at the end of every conversation, they leaned over to Oprah and said, was that okay?
Yeah.
And she said, Barack Obama, these billion-dollar businesses, everybody asked the exact same question. And I can really see this connection here. Do you like me and do I like you? I think that is so essential.
Do you know, Daniel, I think I love that story. And I think that's absolutely true. And as you say, from Barack Obama down to, I don't know, whoever, I mean, at all scales, people lean over and ask that question. And it really demonstrates a fundamental human need for appreciation, to be appreciated. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to agree with everything that everyone's doing, because it's but you need to appreciate that what is good. Find that, I sometimes think of it like a Venn diagram. I mean, what's the bit there in the middle that you can say, do you know what, I think that's great. However, let's see if we can actually, let's see if we can actually sort of make that a bit closer now. So I think that's right. It's that fundamental need we all have for appreciation.
Well, I want to be accepted.
Exactly.
When
right.
I learned public speaking, I learned that 99% of the adult population would prefer to die than to stand up and speak in front of a room.
I know.
And it was because they feared that rejection. And the flip side of that is we all want to be accepted. We all want to be accepted. And I think if we can tell good stories, and I think from my perspective is that if we can tell a good story that's universal, and the majority of people can nod their head and go, I get it. Like the colour of a stoplight, everybody understands that. Everybody understands the colour of the go light.
Yeah.
And when we tell stories that everybody gets, it makes them feel accepted. Okay, I'm now included into this circle. I'm not at the outside. I'm not getting excluded. I'm not getting rejection. I'm in the mix. I'm right here.
I think that's right.
Actually,
I just want to pick up. Yeah, it's a great feeling. I just want to pick up on something you said then as well, because, it actually comes back to something about the pausing and the fear as well, and sort of like wanting to sort of just rattle towards the end. The interesting thing about telling stories, I think, is that it is a great way of overcoming your fear, because we all, for very good reasons, don't want to be separated from the pack, and public speaking or pitching or whatever it is does separate you. It's a vulnerable position to be in, and we think, oh, the wolves are out there who are going to attack me. But in actual fact, when you start to tell a story, yes, people are looking in your direction, but what they're really looking at is this image that you're creating between the pair of you. So even as simply as, when I talk about the 3:30 at Randwick, I mean, yeah, you're looking at me down the line here, but your mind is picturing that race course in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. I mean, it's sort of, so the great thing is a good story sort of deflect some of the attention away from you. I mean, yes, please, I hope people's eyes are trained on you, but their minds will be imagining, oh, they get what I'm trying to achieve here. They get what the future could look like. They get what my problems are. I think it's an incredibly powerful tool for introverts as well. You don't need to be an extrovert to tell a story by any means.
That I absolutely agree with. And if you're an introvert, you've got to accept that. Everybody can tell a story. No doctor pulls the baby out of the womb and holds it to the air and says, this is a natural born storyteller. Storytelling is a skill that you can learn.
You absolutely can.
If you want to.
Yeah, we do.
My grandfather, he was an incredible storyteller. And as I grew up, I always listened to his stories. And I noticed that when he spoke, people listened. And I thought to myself, there has to be some inborn attributes within myself that I can leverage.
Yep.
So I looked at my grandfather and I thought, if I could have that skill, I could grow a successful business. But I realized that there was a certain structure that a good story must follow. There was other things that had to be included, like the quality of your voice. You had to be able to emotionalize the story. And I went on a journey to learn how to tell stories. And I was terrible at the start. And I remember when I was with Emirates Airline, my managers would say, Daniel, you've got a lovely voice. You should do the PA. And I'd get the confidence up and I'd say, well, where's the A4 paper? And they'd give me the A4 paper. And in my mind, there was the PA that I was going to give. And then I picked up the microphone and the emotions came. The legs started to tremble. There was a little bit of a drip there. And I'd say, Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Emirates Flight 416 to Dubai. And people would turn their heads, but I'm still hiding behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And I'd walk through the cabin, they'd say, was that the captain? And I'd say, no, that was me. They'd be like, that was incredible. Can you do it again? And the nerves, I was so nervous. And I realized that the nerves weren't going to go away until I did it over and over and again. And I must
Yep.
have done it hundreds of times. And for the first 100, it was never any easier. But now, 10 years since I've done the job, I can do it in my sleep.
Exactly. And do you know what, Daniel? I think the nerves are great. The nerves are great because they are, I used to be an actor, as I said, I trained at NIDA. And let me tell you, the biggest queue on the first night for a play is for the toilet. I mean, everyone is absolutely terrified on the opening night, but they get those butterflies to fly in formation, and off they go and they do the opening night. And if the critics are nice, then the play runs for a while. But it's really about realizing that nerves and fear are very close relatives to excitement. And so if you can reframe that story you're telling yourself in your mind of, oh, I'm nervous here, to know, I mean, what am I excited about? Or, oh, guess what? I get to do the announcement on this flight. I've been asked to, wow, I get to do this one. How brilliant. Rather than, oh, God, I've got to do the announcement on this one. It's an interesting reframe that because actually it comes back to another part of my work is probably the most important story we tell is the story we tell ourselves.
One of my good friends, Luke, he's from Melbourne, and he would come around to live events with me, and he would help me prepare when I'd go on stage for a big speech. And every time I walked out onto stage, I'd look at him and I'd say to him, are you nervous? And he'd like, am I nervous? He said, you're going on stage. He said, are you nervous? And I said, I am. And he said, why? And I said, you should be. He said, why should you be? And I said, because I feel those nerves, it pushes me. And I want to practice more. I want to read through my script. I want to emotionalize it. I want to visualize it. And I want at the end of the speech, for that speech that I visualized, to be the one that I actually gave.
Yeah.
And that joke has gone on for more than a decade. And sometimes I'll ring him. Hey, I've got 700 people here. I've got to go online. Should I be nervous? And he goes, you should be.
Absolutely
okay, just
right.
checking.
Absolutely. And, coming back to your point about breathing earlier, I mean, when those nerves do rise, I mean, there is a very physiological effect in our breathing goes shallower and shallower. So the trick to it really is to clock the game, the story, and then you go, oh, I see what's going on here. Breathe. Just let it drop down. Let that breath drop down into the ground and connect yourself. Wriggle your feet, wriggle your toes, feel yourself connected to the ground. I mean, I think it was Seneca or some bloke in a toga who said that charisma has roots and wings. And I think feeling yourself rooted, feeling yourself grounded, and then letting yourself fly with your ideas and your feelings and your emotion and your stories, that's the key to connection, is ground yourself and let yourself fly. Talking about airlines again now, aren't we?
At the start of our conversation, we talked about the fastest way to lose a prospect's attention. In your opinion, what are the rewards for capturing and then keeping that attention?
I think the word is trust, which is bandied around. And I'm a big fan of Charles Green, who wrote The Trusted Advisor, who's has the equation. You probably know this. The equation for trust is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. So the first two, credibility and reliability, can you do your job? Do you do your job? Absolutely measurable. Plus intimacy. The intimacy is, as you said earlier, the emotional intelligence, the ability to show you some vulnerability, the ability to dare to ask questions, to share some of yourself through story. That intimacy adds to the top line there. And then the divisor at the bottom, self-orientation. Are you doing this for yourself, or are you doing, is this a gift? Are you there to serve? I think is the thing. And I'm here to serve in any situation. serve, sit up and serve. It's I think that's the thing. And if you are seeing your communication as a service to others, and there is intimacy, yeah, your reason why you're there is because you're good at your job and you do your job. But when you share some intimacy, and can you show that it's actually for the service of others, the prize is trust. That's what I think is that's what I think this is all about. And trusted relationships, I mean, they never go away. Well, they can do, but they tend to last a bit longer than transactional ones.
I was having a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Steve Tolan earlier on today, and we're talking about recruitment. And he said, no business leader ever hires somebody and says, I hope this person fails. He said, every business owner hires somebody and says, I hope this person succeeds. And my truth is that I believe that for everybody who goes and watches a presentation or listens to a speech, says, I hope this is phenomenal. I want this person to blow me away. And they come and they're actually rooting for you. They're sitting there going, blow my mind.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. That actually, that's a really, really good. I absolutely agree with you there, Daniel. And I think that comes back to a misconception that we have about business communication, whether it's pitching, whether it's presentations, whatever it is we view the audience as. Well, we view the audience as an audience and as a yeah, exactly. The ones that are going, they are going to judge us. They're sitting there with it. Oh, I didn't like that very much. That's how we view them. Whereas in actual fact, to go back to an acting metaphor, they are not the audience. They are a scene partner who your job is there to change something. It's I'm here to change how you feel, to change how you think, change how you do something. So rather than they want the best from you, they want to make that connection and change them. Great leader who I worked with many years ago said something that I often quote, which is, she realized after the work we'd done together, she said, my main job is to go into that room, any room, read the temperature of that room and change the temperature of that room.